The Earth, our planet, is a garden teeming with life. It's home to billions of people and millions more plant and animal species. We don't know of another planet in our solar system as rich and diverse. If something happened to the Earth's ability to sustain life, there would be no escape for any of us. Will our planet continue to support our present way of life? Is our need to grow and expand more important than our desire to protect the Earth? Or can we strike a delicate balance in order to do both?
We like to think of the Earth as a dead thing that we can use for profit. Well, it's not. It's this astoundingly beautiful, living organism. And it deserves all of our respect and all of our care. We do take it for granted at the peril of our very lives.
How many of us really stop to think about our environment? How much do we really know about what changes are taking place?
There's a hole in the sky that you can't see that lets the sun through.
I think it's about what happens to the weather and what it could do and stuff.
It's when the sun gets hotter and it heats up our part of the Earth.
Can you please repeat that again?
We have 30% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we did 100 years ago. Within our children's lifetimes, that's likely to double, so that we'll have over 100% more CO2 than we had 100 years ago. And as the solar radiation comes through, it acts as a thermal blanket, the pollution acts as a thermal blanket, holding that radiation closer to the Earth. There are lots of problems that global warming is bringing to us, and we need to begin to solve those problems.
Carbon dioxide has been an important part of our atmosphere. Without it, the planet might not have been able to trap enough heat. We wouldn't have been able to evolve and grow our cities, countries, and industries nearly everywhere on the planet. The greenhouse effect is the name for what the Earth's atmosphere does when it traps the heat from the sun. We have benefited from the greenhouse effect by having a mostly warm, livable climate. But our cars and factories put more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every day. These gases keep building up in the atmosphere, and the heat trapped by them could cause more harm than good. What happens when a greenhouse produces too much heat?
What happens is if you have more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the sun rays come through like they always did, warm the Earth, and the warm Earth emits infrared radiation, that's sort of like warm heat from the Earth into space. And CO2 in the atmosphere acts like a kind of blanket. It keeps that heat trapped. So the air temperature, in the lower atmosphere goes up. That's the effect. That's why it's called the greenhouse effect. It's like being in a greenhouse. You haven't changed the strength of the sun, but it's warm in the greenhouse because the heat can't escape.
I don't think there's any question that the increase in CO2 concentrations that's been observed in the other greenhouse gases are a result of human activities. That's very clear from the data that have been collected.
Well, first of all, global warming is a pollution issue. Our cars and trucks and factories and power plants are pumping out enormous quantities, millions of tons of carbon dioxide and other pollutants, and they're building up in the atmosphere.
Coal is 65% carbon, so when you burn it, you make carbon dioxide. And computer modelers project that people engaged in industrial activity using fossil fuels all over the world will load the atmosphere with ever-increasing amounts of carbon dioxide, which I agree with, we will.
I listen to the scientists about their projections of the future, and what they say is that within our children's lifetime, the pollution that we're emitting is going to change the globe and change the climate in which our children grow up. More intense floods, more severe droughts, rising sea levels, which are going to cause more coastal inundation and destroy wetlands.
The vision of apocalypse is wrong, and the scientists that push it are wrong in that they are urging us to set policy based on flawed, flux-adjusted computer models.
The science of global warming is based primarily on two things: observations of the Earth's climate and predictions based on those observations by complex computer models. Those who believe the global warming scenario and those who are skeptical disagree on practically every aspect of the science.
I became convinced that this stuff was not uncertain, it's just wrong. That the vision of apocalypse is wrong. And we rely on the work of observational scientists who have pointed out the flaws in the computer models that are behind this whole vision of apocalypse, that are projecting apocalypse 50 or 100 years from now, who rely on things like satellite data that show no warming and the weather balloons that have been going up since the early 50s that show no warming.
Well, we've got to recognize what part of this is where the models come in and where the data starts. I mean, models are used to assemble all the data and understanding of the basic physics that we have and put them together in a coherent framework.
The models are flawed. The models are flawed because the scientists do not understand all of the things, the myriad complicated things that make up a hugely complicated climate system, and they admit that they don't.
We know that as carbon dioxide concentrations increase in the atmosphere, that it absorbs energy and that creates a heating effect. So the basic physics are very clear. Now models are used to take those basic physics and project into the future.
Computer climate models can't, at the present time, recreate all the vast interactions that make up the Earth's atmosphere and climate. In some cases, some parameters have to be assigned values based on assumptions that modelers make for certain atmospheric processes. This is called flux adjusting.
They flux adjust because they have to make assumptions, and when they make assumptions, they have to tweak the models in ways that they know are wrong to get the thing to approximate reality.
We're talking about the climate of the whole Earth, and even with the best computers in the world, you can't reproduce every detail in your computer. You can get the main features right, and the models that we have do get the main features right, and that's what's generally ignored by the skeptics. Our models reproduce the temperature change that you see every day as the sun comes up and down. They reproduce the seasonal cycle. They actually match the warming that's occurred over the last century very, very accurately.
The warming project that's coming from the ground-based temperature record are way below what the models predict. And the benefits of CO2 on the biosphere, we're ignoring all that to go with the predictions of apocalypse from these flawed instruments. It's not rational. And rational people, at the end of the day, are not going to accept that. They're just not.
We're better off having spent some money that we might not have needed to spend based on our best understanding of the science than to take the risk that, most of the scientific community is wrong and these few skeptics are right, and we just, roll the dice and hope that things come out well. I don't think that would be a prudent policy.
Humans' industrial activity is good for the environment and not bad, and that while I don't argue with the need to regulate industry so that it doesn't pollute, I just fundamentally disagree with the premise of apocalyptic global warming and that loading the atmosphere with CO2 is going to be this terrible thing.
There's a big debate going on over the skeptics' argument that CO2 isn't a pollutant. Clearly CO2 is something that exists naturally, but when we've added 30% to the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, which comes out of the tailpipes of our cars primarily, the smokestacks of our industry and power plants, and it's built up in the atmosphere and is literally changing the climate here, I got to think that that's a pollutant.
And then at the same time, the observational science that I think shows, at least strongly suggests, that loading the atmosphere with CO2 is not only not bad, it's good because of the positive impact it is having on agriculture, on plant life, particularly the northern forests, on ground cover for biodiversity purposes, and also ground cover that give you more animal life.
Well, certainly with more CO2 in the atmosphere, there is an effect called a fertilization effect. Plants eat CO2, if you will. And if you put more of that in the atmosphere, you enrich the atmosphere, they can actually produce more wood and more crops by using less water. The biggest concern is rapid change, and a potential benefit, of course, is the CO2 fertilization effect. But I don't think anyone's touting that as a reason to not do anything about global warming.
So some people might argue that under certain ideal conditions, having more carbon dioxide can make certain plants grow faster. Just as nitrogen added to agricultural systems can make crops grow faster. That doesn't mean we want to indiscriminately dump nitrogen into our bays and estuaries.
I've been compared to a tobacco salesman by the Vice President of the United States, no less, to which I say CO2 is life and tobacco is death.
Some of the skeptics say that global warming, pollution isn't a problem, and that carbon dioxide can even be good for you. The tobacco industry has said for years that smoking doesn't cause cancer, and there's this shocking parallelism there. People in the tobacco industry say, look, people feel good smoking. They're not addicted. They just like to smoke a lot, and the fact that they can't stop means that they haven't tried hard enough. They may continue to be able to run and play and seem healthy for a while, but after a while it catches up with them, and the emphysema and the lung cancer can follow. Doesn't mean that everybody who smokes gets emphysema or lung cancer, and it doesn't mean that every effect of global warming is going to be devastating, but the overall effect is going to be pretty damaging according to the scientists, and we can take prudent steps right now to prevent the actions that will cause those impacts.
I win the scientific argument. I have no doubt of that. And I've just run this thing from our standpoint like a big lawsuit. And that's why we keep getting attacked by these guys, because we don't accept the premise. We do not concede liability. We're not ready to negotiate damages. Not guilty in terms of the CO2 in the air. It's not bad, it's good.
The fundamental issue is that pollution in the atmosphere, primarily from burning fossil fuels and from deforestation, has increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to a level that hasn't been seen in over 200,000 years on Earth. So we're going into uncharted territory and changing the energy balance of the Earth.
Although some speculate that increased amounts of CO2 could be beneficial in some areas of the world in terms of stimulated plant life and longer growing seasons, the long-term effects to the rest of the world could be significantly more dangerous. If CO2 and other greenhouse gases are allowed to build up without limit, we could find ourselves in the worst possible scenario. We have only to look at our nearest neighboring planet to see the effects of a runaway greenhouse effect. We sometimes refer to the planet Venus as the Earth's sister because it is roughly the same size and mass. The Earth's atmosphere supports an abundance of life, but the planet Venus has a surface temperature of 800 degrees centigrade, hot enough to melt lead. Hotter even than Mercury, a planet much closer to the Sun. Scientists believe that Earth and Venus were formed at approximately the same time and under similar conditions. Earth went on to evolve an abundance of life. The difference seems to be the higher concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of Venus. This higher concentration of CO2 drove a planet-wide greenhouse effect, which trapped the energy from the sun's radiation and forced the temperature of Venus higher and higher. Today, Venus is a lifeless planet without water or oxygen.
In the last couple of years, new research that has been done finds a human fingerprint in the patterns of climate change that have taken place over the last several decades. And the balance of evidence now suggests that we're already seeing the effects of global warming. That's the conclusion of the international panels of scientists that have been asked to study this question by the United Nations.
The scientists have explained that since carbon dioxide lasts for 100 years in the atmosphere, that if we wait until every last skeptic is convinced that global warming is a real problem that we need to do something about, it may be too late. We can't get the genie back in the bottle, and what we may end up with is catastrophic effects from global warming. And we don't want to wait that long. We want to take prudent energy efficiency and renewable energy steps today.
Carbon dioxide has a natural role in our atmosphere. It is a primary component in the process of photosynthesis. Plants take up CO2, store carbon, and release oxygen back to the atmosphere, acting much like the lungs of our planet. This process happens most dramatically in the vast forests of our planet, where millions of tons of carbon are stored. Scientists want to study the way the atmosphere and the forests interact, as a way of shedding light on how our planet might react to increased carbon dioxide and global warming.
If you imagine the world as a ball, which it is, there's a big, fat, wide stripe all the way around the top called the boreal forest. It's a very, very large system. And it has a profound effect on the climate. And the climate has a profound effect on it. So we think we'll understand things about the way the climate and the boreal forest work with each other that'll have profound implications for the future of the climate system, for weather prediction, for all sorts of things.
Deep within the boreal forest of northern Canada, 80 teams of scientists from all over the world set up base camp in one of the largest atmospheric studies in history. NASA led the project, along with the Saskatchewan Research Council, Forestry Canada, the National Oceans and Atmospheric Administration, the British Research Council, and others in order to better understand the impact of the boreal forest on climate. The Boreal Ecosystems Atmosphere Study, BOREAS, allowed scientists to measure the exchanges that are made between the atmosphere and the forest. What they discovered in this study will help them understand the importance of the boreal forest to the atmosphere, and if the boreal forest might aid in keeping our atmosphere from becoming loaded with carbon dioxide.
That's basically what I'm thinking. Okay. So, and I would be averaging for half an hour. That's what
Yeah, we're doing it for 15 minutes.
you're doing it for 15. That's right. That's okay.
Okay.
We're on a 90-foot tower, the top of an aspen forest in Prince Albert National Park. We're on one of the main flux towers of the Boreas project.
And these towers have instruments on them that measure all the standard meteorological stuff, temperature, wind speed, and so forth. But they also have some sophisticated instruments that allow you to measure the amount of carbon dioxide being taken up by the plants, and the amount of water being given off in terms of evaporation, and the amount of heat being given off. And these measurements are very important to understanding how the sun interacts with the earth to influence weather, and how the forest itself takes up carbon during the year.
It's quite a big experiment and quite well spread out. We have 5 big towers down here that stick up above the forest, down here in the Prince Albert area. We have another 4 big towers up in the north near Thompson, Manitoba, about 400 miles away. Our aircraft are like a mobile strike force. They go from one to the other as opportunity permits. So in managing it, you're trying to manage 2 groups of people quite widely separated, a small fleet of aircraft, very different aircraft, all of them, that do very different things. And you're trying to make the very, very best of the weather opportunities that come up.
Most of the measurements in the Boreas study were taken between 1994 and 1996. The information that was gathered will help scientists make important refinements to climate models. It will also help to make predictions about future global warming and how it might affect the boreal forest and beyond.
The things we've learned are going to improve weather forecasts, just numerical weather prediction, enormously, and we've seen that already. That's a short-range benefit. The long-range benefit is that we're going to understand how this system, which is the big boreal forests in the world, and the atmosphere interact to produce the climate that you have here, and how that might change if either the climate changes or the forest changes, or both.
We put about 6 gigatons, that's billion metric tons, or a trillion kilograms of carbon into the atmosphere each year from burning fossil fuel. The forest itself takes up about 1 to 2 gigatons of that. In other words, somewhere between 15 and 30% of that is filtered out by the boreal ecosystem, we believe, or at least the high latitude forest.
As a storehouse for carbon, the boreal forest will have a large role in determining the effects of global warming, because it stores one of the major greenhouse gases. However, the boreal forest is very sensitive to temperature changes and could easily become one of the most likely areas to be affected by any major climate change.
One of the things we are now coming to believe is that's being stored in the soils, the peats, not in the forest itself, but in the peats. The layer of peat has been accumulating since the last ice age. Forests gradually turn their roots over, and their leaves and litter, they pack this beneath the peat, and because it's so cold and wet, the stuff doesn't decay, and it just tends to accumulate. One of the concerns, of course, is as it begins to warm, the climate begins to warm, and the warming is expected to be the most rapid in continental interior's high latitude, that the warming and drying of this peat might cause it to rapidly decompose.
The boreal forest has been storing carbon for centuries, and if temperatures begin to rise, the forest could suffer serious consequences. The forest could in fact start to add more carbon to the atmosphere than it stores. Right now, the forest is a buffer against global warming, But for how long?
We call the boreal site, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, ground zero, because when you look at all the plots for predicted temperature increases, it looks like a bomb's gone off in this area. The greatest warming is predicted for right about here, and then circles of less warming around it. So that's why we call it ground zero, because it looks like a bullseye.
If the global warming predictions that scientists are making are correct, everyone will be affected. There will be no place to hide. We will all have to adjust to the most rapid climate changes in the history of the planet. Predicting the outcome of global warming 50 to 100 years from now is not simple. The debate continues on what the real outcome is likely to be. The United Nations study suggests that a 1.5 to 4.5 degree centigrade rise in the average global temperature is possible in the next century. While this may not seem significant, the difference in the average temperature today and the last ice age is thought to be between 5 and 7 degrees. So if these predictions are correct, the changes to the Earth's weather patterns could be severe. Environmental groups have worked hand in hand with many citizens to protect endangered species and delicate habitats in danger. Global warming might well be one of the most dangerous threats ever faced by groups trying to help endangered species and environments survive.
A lot of the migratory species will come under stress because they may migrate in an eons-old pattern, but when they land to feed, the thing that they depend upon for food may not be there or may have already finished its life cycle because the climate has changed. Then there's going to be no way that they can continue their migration north because they just won't have the food to sustain them on the voyage.
Well, I think there's a number of impacts on forests. The most basic is that the climate that a particular existing forest is adapted to will no longer be there. And trees can't migrate, so existing forests will be under increasing stress as the climate that they're really designed to thrive in moves out from under them, quite literally.
We have been competing with the oceans of the world for years for land, and the costs have been enormous. Global warming might make that battle much harder to win and far more expensive as sea levels begin to rise.
The two basic reasons why sea level is rising would be, first, thermal expansion of the water, which simply means that the water is heating up a bit, and because it heats up, it expands out. Because it expands, it takes more volume, so sea level goes up. And then the second one is water that had been in the form of ice on top of the land, like in glaciers or in ice sheets. If that melts, or if it goes into the ocean some other way, like iceberg calving, then that adds to the volume of water in the oceans, and so sea level rises from that.
Climate change might cause regional climates to warm and bring with them diseases that have never before been able to gain a foothold. Tropical diseases like malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever, and encephalitis will be more apt to travel to northern latitudes along with the warmer weather that might be brought about by global warming.
In southern places, in the US for example, dengue fever and heat waves are going to affect areas in the southern part of the US and cities as far north as Chicago. And those heat waves, the scientists tell us, are going to become more frequent, and they're moving north. The dengue fever mosquito has already reached Chicago, and it's going north.
Severe weather effects like storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, even ice storms will become more common. Severe weather costs governments billions of dollars every year. We don't have to think too hard to remember the many recent examples of severe weather. Flooding in the Red River, the Mississippi, Quebec, and California. Ice storms in Quebec and Ontario, and snowstorms as far south as Texas and Mexico.
And that means that the way we live is going to have to change. It means that there are going to be more extremes of weather, and we're beginning to see a lot of that. More severe storms, more severe droughts, more severe floods.
Now, in the 20th century, we are finally facing the fact that humanity is having a great impact on our planet. Our industries, cars, power plants all contribute to the changes we are making. Our population has grown to the point where we can't help but have a greater and greater effect. The more than 6 billion people on the planet all contribute to the newly created compounds that find their way into our atmosphere and water. Even natural compounds like CO2 are being produced in amounts that wouldn't have been predicted just a century ago. Our own human nature conspires against us. We try not to face the challenges around us until we absolutely have to. Even so, many experts believe that no matter what the outcome of global warming, we will adapt.
The warming they are projecting from these computer models is not a lot different than the warming that would occur if you moved from where you live in Canada to Phoenix, Arizona, where I grew up. Now, Phoenix, Arizona in the summer gets to be 115 in the shade, but you survive in Phoenix in the desert. People survived there before there was electricity. Now we have electricity. Burns coal, by the way, or falling water behind dams. Environmentalists don't like those either. And it runs air conditioning so that you can exist there in the summer. That's what you do, you adapt. That's what we always do. You adapt. And we go along living our lives, creating wealth to deal with the environmental problems that we're faced with and making changes in our technology if those changes prove to be needed.
Biggest concern is that with the global changes in climate, the changes in the ecosystems, the changes in the way humans have to do their business, the way animals and plants will adapt, that this could happen so rapidly that our normal coping mechanisms, both sociologically, economically, and biologically, simply will be stressed beyond the point where they can adapt to these changes. Human nature has not demonstrated a great deal of ability to sacrifice. I think the hope personally lies more in adapting to the situation, to the growing population on the planet, which is one of the biggest causes of pollution. Adapt to that through improved technology, improved ways to do business. For example, getting away from fossil fuels and towards solar, biofuels, and other sources of energy. Humans are extremely innovative, and I would say that innovation at this point is our way out.
We shift from coal to natural gas, for example, in generating electricity. We can get about a 60% reduction in the pollution per unit of electricity that we produce. And then beyond that, we also need to introduce energy sources that don't produce any carbon dioxide, such as wind power, biomass energy, solar energy. Different sources would be most appropriate in different areas.
I think if you did that, you could do it in a way that would not have sudden, dramatic, catastrophic impacts. But the U.S. economy is so large, we use so much electricity, it is very hard to imagine totally eliminating the coal-fired electricity base and substituting anything for it. For sure, it would drive up the cost structure for electricity in the United States. And while electricity isn't the only thing that goes into a vibrant economy, it's one of the most important.
A major change in the way that electricity is generated will require costly construction to new and existing power plants. Any major change will mean that consumers are going to pay more, not just for buying electricity, but when they pay for any new service in a more expensive economic environment. The less time we have to make changes in our energy system, the more costly it is going to be.
We have the momentum that's built into our energy system, and it takes a long time to move that. And the sooner we start, the more gradually we can do it, and that makes it easier economically.
The technical solution is going to be the way out of this problem. Not everyone using less energy, but a better use, a more intelligent use of energy. The Earth is flooded with energy. Energy is not our problem. The sun produces more than enough energy at the surface of the Earth to meet our needs. The trick is trying to capture it and use it in the right way so that we don't pollute ourselves out of existence.
In December 1997, Kyoto, Japan hosted delegates from more than 150 countries. They gathered to ratify an already existing agreement, the 1992 United Nations Framework on Climate Change. Our political representatives concerned about greenhouse gas emissions came from all over the world to find some kind of compromise.
It was a difficult conference because most governments were trying to figure out how do we deal with the problem of global warming. There were 150 countries represented, and a lot of them took it very seriously. Unfortunately, the US government tried to figure out how can we cut this baby in half? How can we let industry have a win and begin to do something about global warming?
People in developing countries want the same advantages we in developed countries have had. They want to be able to grow their economies and raise their standard of living by burning fossil fuels. The truth is that developed countries like the US, Canada, and Western Europe have reached a great standard of living by burning fossil fuels. Politicians the world over are facing the fact that developed nations have to lead the way when it comes to emissions cutting.
We need to lead by example. The Chinese are going to end up buying the technology for clean energy and a clean future from us. We're not going to end up buying it from them. So what we need to do is develop the energy efficiency and renewable energy steps and recognize that what we do here, we can sell abroad, and we'll all be able to breathe cleaner air. Secondly, we need to recognize that we've emitted in the developed world 3/4 of the world's global warming pollution. The developing world, like China, have only emitted 1/4 of it. They're going to follow our lead, and they've said so. And if we lead in the direction that we're going of inaction and more pollution, they're going to follow our lead. But if we lead in the direction of responsible stewardship of the earth and protecting our future for our kids and investing in more efficiency and renewables, then they'll follow our lead too.
It's impossible to deny that our lifestyles in the developed world have contributed to the majority of greenhouse gas emissions. Is there a way to make our lives less costly to the environment? Are we willing to make changes, to give up some of the fringe benefits of our lifestyles, in hopes of keeping the delicate balance of our environment?
Well, there's no question that groups with a vested interest in doing the way we're doing them now will resist change, and that's always the case. It will not end. That is, there will always be some dinosaurs who say what we were doing before was just fine and we don't need to change things, and they always tend to inflate the difficulty of changing.
Guilty. Guilty. We think what we do is good and not bad, and I'm guilty of that. Plead guilty. We have a vested interest in keeping our business alive. Guilty.
The shift has to be away from fossil fuels, and it seems from what you read in the media lately that there is a move and a trend in this direction, and can not only be good for the environment, but hopefully can stimulate the economy as well. So we'd like to see, if you will, a war on pollution, and perhaps it could do two things: not only improve the environment, but also stimulate the economy through developing the new technologies which will be required to shift away from fossil fuels.
It's a myth to say that the environment is at war with the economy on global warming. The energy efficiency steps that we advocate are good for the environment and good for the economy. So for example, if you invest $700 more in a 45 mile per gallon car, it will save you $3,300 over the life of the car. Well, that's a good bargain in US or Canadian dollars. Similarly, a compact fluorescent light bulb. It costs 10 times as much when you buy it. It lasts 10 times longer than an incandescent bulb, but it saves you 3/4 of your electric bill. And it saves a ton of coal per bulb. That's a win-win for the environment and the economy. If industrialists who are used to short-sighted, short-term, profit-driven actions will take a somewhat longer view and will say, look, we need to be responsible corporate citizens. We need to make a fair buck, and we need to protect our children's future. We'll all win. The environment and the economy can both benefit by energy efficiency and renewable energy, and will curb global warming in the process.
The vision of apocalypse is wrong, and the scientists that push
Anytime
it
humans are radically
are wrong
altering
in that they are
All the models
urging
suggest
us
that as the
to
CO2
change that
builds in the
policy
atmosphere, which it's
based
continuing to
on
do, that
Within our
that
children's
increases
lifetime.
will-
Both sides of the global warming debate believe that they're right. But who should we listen to? If we listen to the proponents of global warming, we will start to make changes now. And if global warming doesn't happen, or isn't as bad as predicted, we will have made changes that are ultimately beneficial to the environment. Greenhouse emissions will be reduced by using more non-polluting energy sources. However, the money that government and industry will have spent to make these changes will be gone. If we listen to the skeptics, we will continue along much as we have been. And if they are wrong, we could find ourselves in the position of having to make huge sacrifices, forcing our children to deal with a much greater problem, one that might not even have a solution. Human growth and industrialization have already destroyed many natural habitats that can never be recovered. The Earth is resilient, but we may be running the risk of tilting the delicate balance of the Earth's ecosystems forever. Each one of us is at the center of this debate. We have to decide which choices are reasonable, given what we know and what we are learning with each passing day. Human nature is one of facing our challenges only when it becomes absolutely necessary. In order to face the challenge of global warming, we have to understand what is happening and be prepared to become part of the solution. There's a need to shift our energy dependence away from fossil fuels, not only to reduce carbon emissions, but because they will not last forever. Energy conservation and renewable energy will help preserve the Earth's delicate balance into the future. We are the only ones who can step back and observe our actions and decide how to balance our needs with the needs of our planet.
I'm an optimist, though, and yes, I think we'll do it, and I think it will be, as we are challenged here by adversity, I think it will make us stronger as a civilization if we act in the right way, and I believe we will.
The beauty, the majesty of nature, the amazingness of nature seems to me, is so deeply impressive to me that I want to run to nature's defense whenever I can, because that's the one thing nature can't seem to do is defend itself. And we're so smart. Human beings are so radically intelligent and inventive. and so unguided in the ways we use our powers, that we're very dangerous, a very dangerous enemy to nature.
The problems are so big, what can I do? And I remind people, well, you don't have to do it all. But there is something that you can do. And it can be easy. It doesn't have to be a great sacrifice. As I say, if it comes out of your own heart and spirit, your own inclinations, it's a thing that's easy to do. So it's something I think that we have to be mindful of as we make the decisions that have to do with our lives and how we live our lives and what we want out of our lives.
I know that the environment's getting kind of changed and screwed up because there's all these things that are happening. Like,
if something is out of balance, then I guess it wouldn't work.
The pollution it wasn't here when we got here. The humans made the pollution.
I probably could recycle a lot more. Be very conscious about the products that I'm buying.
Don't use as much electricity. Like if you're not in your bedroom, turn off the light. And if you're not listening to music, turn it off and everything.
Plant more trees where you can.
I think maybe they could put like vents or something on their smokestacks to keep less of the pollutants into the air.
We can recycle and do a lot to help the world so it won't cause as much pollution as it does. We can save our rainforests.
Assume that if we don't help the problem out, it won't get any better, and if we help it, it might change our future a lot.
I think it's time we started to realize what's happening, because if we don't smarten up right away, it's gonna be gone. We can't do anything about it later on. So may as well get to it right now.